Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and a warm welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. I think the students have come back. Wonderful. My name is Asad Lalji. I'm the CEO of Avid Learning. As Mantu famously said, Bombay is not a city, it is a way of life. And perhaps that is why we keep returning to it. Because the maximum city demands rereading from a multiple of perspectives. At Avid Learning, Mumbai or Bombay has been long as a curatorial muse for us. Through the years, from Multipolis Mumbai to Uncovering Urban Legacies, we have tried to decode this dynamic metropolis through different lenses. And this evening continues that engagement. We're especially delighted to welcome back two remarkable documentarians of the city, Robert Stevens and Sunhil Sippi, who last shared the Avid stage in 2022 at a very different moment in Mumbai's evolution. 4 years later, much has shifted. The city skyline has risen higher. Infrastructure has redrawn familiar geographies. Conversations around sustainability, density, public space, and heritage have deepened. Access has changed, narratives have evolved. And also have our speakers. Tonight, their work sits at a fascinating intersection of imagined futures and lived realities. Archives versus access. Tonight's program also continues one of Avid's flagship series, Uncovering Urban Legacies, which began in 2021. A special thank you to Ms. Nidhi Chaudhary, Director of the NGMA, and Deputy Curator Shruti Das for hosting us. And this brings me to the task at hand. The National Gallery of Modern Art Mumbai and Avid Learning present Uncovering Urban Legacies, Searching for Bombay in Mumbai, a city-centric conversation that engages Mumbai through different lenses, but complementary issues. Please join me in welcoming our speakers, photographer and director Sunhil Sippi. Sunhil has a new book soon to come out, Race Day. You've probably seen the promo outside, and he's going to share more information on that. And architect, Urbs Indus, and author of Bombay Imagine, Robert Stevens, whose second edition is out, and it's out for sale, so hopefully you guys have bought it and get him to sign it. This is the fourth collaboration with both Robert and Sunhil with Avid Learning. And our moderator for the evening is writer, scholar, and journalist Amrita Shah. Sunhil and Robert are going to be doing presentations, after which they are going to be in conversation with Amrita. So look forward to a wonderful evening. Over to Amrita for her opening remarks. And thank you for being here in such great numbers.
Good evening. In 1964, the literary critic Roland Barthes wrote an essay on the Eiffel Tower. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the Eiffel Tower, at least an image of it. This is how Barthes wrote about it. First, he commented on its ubiquity. He says you have to take precautions not to see it because it's everywhere. He added that the writer Maupassant would lunch there because, as he said, it was the only place in Paris where I don't have to see it. The Eiffel Tower was an utterly useless monument, Barthes maintained. Visitors came by the millions, but there was nothing there to see, no museum or anything, no enclosed space. But then Barthes looked closer at the monument. He started at the base, noticing the exaggeratedly oblique intersection of the metal pillars, and then the staircase, which offers the enlarged spectacle of all the details, plates, beams, bolts, which make the tower the surprise of seeing how this rectilinear form, which is consumed in every corner of Paris as a pure line, is composed of countless segments, interlinked, crossed, divergent, an operation of reducing an appearance to its contrary reality. He then went to the top of the tower and he says, the tower looks at Paris. He describes the panorama that unfolds with all its history, its geography, and its cultural significance, and the spectacle of humanity laid out before one's eyes. You do not just look at it, you have to make sense of it, to connect the landmarks you know with others, to see it as a continuity through space and time. And this panorama did not exist before the tower made it possible to see Paris in this way. So there's a lot more in this essay which need not detain us. But the reason I refer to this very influential essay is in response to a question that is on the poster for this event and is at the heart of this session, which is how do we read a city that is constantly rewriting itself? And I suggest, following from Barthes, that it is by following the lead of those who can see beyond the obvious. The Eiffel Tower was there for all to see, but it required someone to look at it, to love it, to be exasperated by it, to be amazed by it, to make it assume a new significance in our eyes. And I think that our speakers today do just that with Mumbai or Bombay, whichever you call it. Sunhil Sippi and Robert Stevens deal with material reality, with bridges, sewers, roads, people, animals. They see these, but they also transcend the material and the literal to show them to us in a new way. They are very different practitioners. Sunhil is a photographer who returns again and again to his subject to make collections of striking images. Robert is an architect who combines archival visions, imagery, and text to look at imagined schemes for Bombay. Through them, we see and then we re-see our city. So Avid Learning brought them together in 2022, and today it is my pleasure to moderate a conversation with them. But first, they will tell us what they have been up to in these intervening years. So we start with Sunhil.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming out. It's a huge crowd, which is terrifying me. And Amrita, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it's probably quite a good thing that I'm reading Barthes at the moment and obsessed with the word punctum, if anyone is interested later to talk about it. I'm just going to start off with a little entertainment. So could we... Are the lights down? I'm not breathing. Well, so that I don't even know where to start, but I was a filmmaker for many, many years. In fact, a member of the audience was an assistant director to me in 2013, which was lovely to meet today. But, you know, the thing is, I was a filmmaker who worked with crews of up to 100, 150 people, and it was always very exhausting. And I found it very tiring, and that's actually where my segue into photography kind of began. And when I made this film, it was me wandering around with a tiny little camera at the racecourse, filming with absolutely no agenda, which is the way I like to photograph, and stitching a narrative together later. And that is how my photography works. 3 years ago, Robert and I were on at the Royal Opera House in conversation, and I was launching my first book, The Opium of Time, and he was launching Bombay Imagined. It does have a mind of its own. And so bear with me. I'll try to keep it entertaining. And, you know, my practice of aimlessness and not really planning what I'm doing culminated in this first book. And I always wondered what Robert's practice was in many ways. Did he, because my practice was extremely meditative. It was a reaction to being in film studios, to being controlled by executives or agencies or very important people, and me being sort of squashed. So my wanderings on the streets, as Amrita said, very repetitive. I'd revisit the same places again and again and again and again and again. And then at some point, I would find the courage to try and build a narrative around my experiences. And I wonder how Robert sort of wandered through libraries and archives, rummaging and discovering, and how meditative that must have been and how repetitive that must have been. And while our results of our practice is, you know, obviously very, very different, I think the passion with which we probably revisit is probably quite similar. You know, 3 years later, he's reimagined his book. It's out in the second edition, and I probably gave you a hint in the film that I'm working on something to do with the racecourse. So it's a book that, you know, when I did The Opium of Time, it was a citywide, aimless narrative that was sort of covered so many different subjects, and it was my first collection of images. And the one thing I observed later was that I had really a reasonably strong body of work on the racing community that I'd begun in 2015, and that I had also been rummaging through the eastern seaboard of the city with a great deal of repetition. So both these subjects sort of jumped out at me, and while the eastern seaboard is a very large, amorphous body of work that is extremely hard to navigate, when I heard rumors about the redevelopment of the race course, I just started photographing far more intensely. 3 years later, more Instagram followers, more grey hair. Because as your project as you get more passionate and more focused about things, more eyes land up on you. So when I started, it was sort of like, there's a certain kind of innocence in your first project. And when you hit the second one, you're starting to sort of consider what you're doing perhaps with a little more gravitas. Robert and the racecourse. Well, first, I actually want to start with this photograph of Robert's, because as much as we talk about my photography, I think this is probably one of the finest photographs of the city from above that I've seen. And you'll actually see the other interesting thing when I sort of refer to Robert's work is that he's quite often looking at places, spaces, cities from above. And I'm sort of on the ground in the dirt and exploring people, situations, histories, things like that, but on very much on a ground level. So that's another interesting thing that I sort of observed. But you know, when I was going through Bombay Imagined, Bombay Park was the most obvious connection between the Mahalakshmi racecourse and you know Robert's projects. And it was quite interesting because as I was working on my project, it was interesting to learn that the racecourse was initially in bicolor because the Mahalakshmi is actually below sea level. But it was lovely to read this stuff, which is it's wonderful with what rapidity the foulest matters are absorbed and assimilated into their systems by plants. It is precisely because the flats are so filthy that they're so well suited for a park. Ah, we've heard that, isn't there? Some news about a park on the horizon, right? And this particular place, you know, it reminds us so much of, in a sense, what's there right now. Upon the redeemed landscape, all castes and creeds were invited to congregate with separate food kiosks for each community and an array of recreational facilities to boot. It never happened, right? So a statue of a fool in a cap was to memorialize administrative predecessors responsible for dumping refuse on the low-lying grounds with an inscription in 4 languages that read, "Forgive us, for we know what we did." And it's unclear what subsequent commissioners did with Crawford's verdant imagination. And I love Robert's lovely little touches of humor. But it's self-evident that what they did not do the Bombay Park. But this is it. And as you see it here, this is very clearly what became the Mahalakshmi Racecourse. And you can see over here where actually the racecourse began, which was in Baikala. That was where it was initially in the city. So which brings me to a funny connection, because this was the cover image of The Opium of Time. And I found an interesting little connection between this and Race Day, because the platform through this window, obviously none of this exists anymore. That wall, that beautiful window is gone, and as you can see, the buildings in the background have now been built. But this was called the horse local, and the train came in on the first platform, and they would step out and literally step straight into the racecourse. And Subhag, a trainer from the racecourse who I've been working with over the last 10 years, had written this for me in the book, which I want to sort of speak. The detail in the design was incredibly precise, to the extent that the Mahalakshmi station was the only one to have a special platform designed to open directly out towards the iron gates of the racecourse, unlike the other platforms for slow trains. The design made it easy for the horses to travel to other racecourses around the country, both comfortably and safely, in trains known as horse specials. As Mahalakshmi was built on low-lying marshland, it was conducive to racing only from November to April, the months when it didn't rain. Then, well, now we sort of start getting into some of my imagery that I want to share and sort of talk you through. So there's no light on the screen, right? You can see the pictures, yeah? This was 2022, and it's just really funny when I look at the city today. I thought these were the sort of modern pictures. I thought these were the pictures that were going to be showing the future of the racecourse. I didn't think that these were going to start looking sort of nostalgic at a particular point in time if you walk around today. So literally I went just about a few weeks ago, and this is sort of what it's starting to look like. Obviously, it's a concert ground, but then I sort of put these vintage filters on these photographs, thinking, okay, this is quite fun to look at this as we're looking at our old photographs of what the city used to be like, and we're looking at this incredibly modern skyline. And what's the future? So there are these conversations, obviously, that are happening all around this, which is obviously a very contentious conversation, which I was very nervous when I was doing my project on the racecourse, and I bumped into Robert after a talk a few months ago, and I said, gosh, I think I'm taking a reasonably neutral stand, but I'm actually quite concerned about what's going on with the redevelopment of the racecourse and underground parking lots and botanical gardens and all kinds of sports centers and things like that. And he quietly whispered to me, he said, don't worry, Now we'll see what he has to say about that a bit later, So I'll talk a little bit about my journey, and it began in 2015, where I was sort of wandering through the racecourse on a misty morning, as I do, wandering through random places, and I made this photograph, and it was a wonderful moment, and I sort of went home and looked at it, and then, as I do, these things end up on my phone or something. And I was at dinner at my dear friend Priya's house, and there were these two trainers from the racecourse who were having dinner, Subhag Singh and Shujat Hussain, and I said, I went to the racecourse the other day and made some pictures. They said, oh, let's have a look. And I showed them this among a couple of others on the phone, and they got really excited, and they said some beautiful things to me, and then they granted me an all-access pass. And they said, look, come as often as you like, do what you want, wander around, do anything. And I was like, oh, all right. So I showed up, and I just started doing what I love to do, which is walk around with absolutely no purpose. And I started this work to get access into places like this, inside the jockey room, I took it very much for granted, because I would just walk around and then walk in, and these jockeys were doing what they're doing, and I just became my usual invisible self. But the thing I started to remark, and what I sort of enjoy about perseverance, is that, now 2023, we're in the same space, and everyone looks exactly the same, And here, this is just used to, when I started to put this work together, it took a long time, because I was going through photographs I'd made in 2015, and then I'm looking at the same picture of 2024. And in fact, while I was sort of walking through the jockey room, some of the jockeys would recognize me. And, I remember a few times pulling my phone out and trying to find a picture that I'd made of them and sort of sharing it with them. But I was just shocked at how little they changed. They looked exactly the same. And it happened again and again. These guys were just absolutely not changing. And, it was, it only really started to dawn on me when I was assembling the narrative. And I thought to myself, in a sort of random sort of fashion, was that this Bombay-Mumbai conversation is a complex one. But in a funny way, this transformation of Mumbai, or how we see it, developing around the racecourse, and inside there's this static Bombay that doesn't change, and it's sort of, while we often talk about Bombay as emotion or feeling or state of mind, or this was real, these guys, nothing changed, So anyway, I really had such a wonderful opportunity to make pictures over here, and I got the opportunity to photograph India's first ever night race. Now, I mean, today you just couldn't do this. I was riding in the Jeep around with the horse ambulance and things like that run parallel. And for whatever it's worth, in those days, cameras weren't quite as advanced as they are now. So to make pictures like this was really quite hard in that lighting environment. But and when I made them, I just kept them on a hard drive. I didn't think too much about them. But again, as I started to assemble a narrative, they started to make more sense. Also, the other thing is, now if you go to the races today, obviously they're selling Audis and there's beer stands and influencers and lots of, as you would have seen in the video, very contemporary thing. But in 2015, this was the first and only Lavani performance that ever happened at the races, and it was mesmerizing to see this local tradition happen in a space like this. And the crowds were completely enchanted by it. It was beautiful, but it never happened again. But again, I'm just so grateful that I was there, that I was able to actually document it and capture it, And why? Why racing? Why is racing and the racing community important to the city? And for me, it's because it represents a continuum, So as things completely, as Amrita was saying, as Asad was also saying, as there's this consistent transformation in the city, there's something that you kind of hold on to, something that stays somewhat static, seems to stay static. 2 minutes, oh bloody hell. Okay. And now the rumors of development start to go around. I make pictures in color, it's wonderful. And as I'm making my work, I see that as I'm observing this world and getting deep into it and all of that, I wonder if I'm sort of intrusive. And then this lovely line from Susan Sontag came up, which is that a photographer's role can be to both loot and preserve. And I find that to be one of the most reassuring lines that I've read. I would love to tell you the story, but it's probably quite, well, I will. So one of the things was, Uttam Singh is the oldest trainer at the racecourse. He was 100 when I made this photograph. You note my speed of speech increasing. I'll start it, so I'll finish. So, I went to photograph him very randomly one afternoon, and as he was sort of close to the horse knocked him, and he fell. And my camera wasn't set properly, and I just lifted up, got one quick photograph. It was completely overexposed, and he crashed to the ground, but he bounced straight back up. He was 100, and I wondered, this was what provoked that question of, when I put this picture in my book, I said, am I being too intrusive? Am I to reveal this? But it was only in 2023 when Uttam Singh died that Subhag called me and said, do you have any of those pictures? And I remember feeling, I have to continue. I have to continue this work. It's important, So most of the time you wonder why you're making a photograph. I'm going to zip through this. I don't usually have an answer to that, but I know that I was going there regularly at this time, and this was the sort of skyline I was looking at. This was the world I was looking at. And then it starts to make sense why you're making these photographs, because things start to change. Skylines start to change. The environment starts to change. The coastal road starts to get built. And then the city develops like this around it. And then this happens, which is one of the most important things I really wanted to do, which was, in the middle of the night, very, very early morning, this flyover sort of coming through the middle of the racecourse had always sort of intrigued me so much. And I managed to get this one photograph of the horse walking away. And I wonder, where does this lead, you know? So anyway, with my work, it takes a long time. And I'm very slow, as most people would get very annoyed, my designers and a lot of people around me. I like to work very meditatively. But as Rilke says, patience is all. And yeah, I mean, these are, again, the continuum. This is the world today. It stays pretty static. I'm glad I returned as often as I did. My favorite photograph. And I'm glad I did it without purpose. And I have a 60-second film, if I'm allowed to play it.
When the season is over, it's the public space that I revisit. Over almost a decade, life within the racecourse remains untouched, padlocked to time. A community moving pragmatically from season to season, neither resistant nor welcoming of change, graceful in their stubbornness. I recognize a survival instinct that would inadvertently preserve something sacred in a city where things can change in the blink of an eye, just like a gambler's lucky streak. It's becoming clearer. I want to create a record of sorts to document a unique world that sits on the brink of change. So even as big deals are inked in the surrounding glass towers and the bulldozers warm up their engines, I'm ultimately left with a single overarching question. In this grand and thriving metropolis, is anything really sacred anymore?
Thank you.
I'm always a nervous speaker, and I'm especially nervous because I saw that time thing. So I'll try and be quick. This is 2022. This was the first day Sunhil and I met. He traveled from South Bombay to Bandra. I was really touched. And just see the smile on my face. It was delightful. It was so much fun. And in that meeting, Sunhil shared his book, The Opium of Time, and I loved it. I'm looking through. At first, I had no idea who this man is, and then he gives this book. This is Marine Drive, Worldly Village, and I was just enamored, absolutely enamored with his work, as well as his individuality. This was our panel at the Opera House. You can see Naresh Fernandez in the middle here moderating. In this image, Naresh is asking me a question. But I'm looking straight at Sunhil, right? It was a hangover from that first meeting. I was totally, so yeah, it was so much fun. And this was the book. You saw the image already. We did not coordinate our presentations, by the way. They just happened to look the same. So I apologize. But I was enamored. And I had no idea why I loved his work, The Opium of Time. I also had no idea why Bombay Imagine, right? The stories of Bombay's unbuilt past, why they fascinated me so much. I had no clue, but they intrigued me to no end. To that point, it had been 8 years of searching. So that first session discussion was 2022. Now, of course, we're in 26. So for the last 4 years, I've been very subconsciously reflecting, why did his work move me? Why does Bombay's unbuilt past fascinate me so much? In those 4 years, Sunhil has created this new work of art. I cannot wait to see it. I know it's at press right now and pre-orders are open. And Sunhil shared, this is my favorite image. I did not tell him this and I didn't know it was his favorite, but I love it. This is one of the images in the book. I love it because Sunhil's work, it calls us to ask deep life questions, right? I genuinely believe that. One of the questions when I see this image, I have to ask this question, why do horses roll? Right? Why? Why would they do this? And this is an answer. Rolling can be used to groom themselves, repel insects, to cool down, and they may roll simply because it feels good. Right? That last line, I love that. I think that's why we like to go to Chowpatty, we like to go to the beach, take our shoes off and feel the sand in our feet. It feels good when we connect with the earth, like how horses roll. This is a new project in the second edition of Bombay Imagined. It's the Mumbai coastal forest. And the vision is simple. It's a place where citizens of every economic strata, anything. You can come, your feet and body can connect with the earth, right? Because like horses, it feels good. The earth, we're connecting with the earth, whether it's the unbuilt past or whether it's Sunil's work. This is another image Sunil shared, and I was intrigued, right? Like horses in this channel of water. So why do they swim in water at a race course? Horses swim at race courses primarily for low impact, high intensity cardiovascular conditioning. Cool, like I'm learning things. I like this. But this line caught me. Eliminating stress, the idea that water eliminates stress. And you see this in Bombay's unbuilt past. This is 1720. Captain Johnson says Bombay has a stressful relationship with water, right? With high tide, with monsoon rains. How do you respond to that? By cutting a channel through the heart of the city from Haji Ali in the foreground to Mazgaon in the background, right? You're giving a channel for that water, that force to go without stressing the city as a very abrupt hard edge. Of course, that did not happen. This is the city today. Hornby Vellard was made, and that's why when it rains heavily and when there's high tide, there's catastrophe, right? There's chaos because we're not eliminating that stress. This idea of water eliminating stress, it also impacts our lives deeply. This is my wife Tina. When she was giving birth to our son, she wanted a water birth. Right? And what's the reason, right? It feels, she said, it feels good. It's physically stress relieving, emotionally, the sound of water. And I also love the idea that a child who's in the amniotic fluid in the womb enters the world in water. It's not a wet to a dry, immediate transition, right? You're eliminating stress in this big life transition. This was our son. He was born in Bandra. And he was born of water, so we named him Kairav. The name means born of water, and it's specifically the white lotus that blooms in the darkness of night. That's the meaning. So water, right? We are creating this new, very foundational relationship with water through our work, through our lives. This is another favorite image, which Sunil shared. When I see this, I see sky. Right, what a beautiful sky. And last week, right, everyone's posting sky images, breaking news. You know, AQI city looks like a dream. Why do you look like a hill station? This is all last week. This is one of my favorites. Today's forecast, visible dreams. Right, we're the financial capital of the country, and yet the sky is having this kind of impact on everyone. It's amazing. Feels like Mumbai is in love today. But this is my favorite. This is a scroll article from 2019. The title is A Spiritual Experience, right? So powerful. 1922, the BDD Chawls, which we all know at Worli, those were being constructed. And all the openings had concrete ventilators on them. And C.F. Andrews, he was a Bombay resident. He was also a reverend. He was a priest. And he said this when he saw the Chawls. One of the most serious defects is the shutting out from every single room the sight of the sky, right? Because he knows seeing the sky, like Scroll knows, seeing the sky is a spiritual experience. It moves us. So he said, remove the ventilators, have windows with chajjas and balconies where everyone can experience the sky, right? And the sky is fire, right? It's the experience of the star, of the light that's generated. It moves us. Also, we saw, when I see this image, I can feel the wind rushing over. And so I was intrigued. Why do jockeys crouch while riding horses? Jockeys crouch, known as the monkey crouch, to maximize a horse's speed and efficiency by reducing wind resistance, right? They're working with that element of wind, of air. I can see that when I look at this image. I can feel the pressure of the wind. In 1918, a journalist with Times of India is writing about St. Thomas Cathedral, writing about the problems of it. They say lack of proper ventilation in the old building was acknowledged to be an evil of the greatest magnitude. They had a poor relationship with wind. The new building, which was never built, was to be delightfully cool. Right? They were rewriting their relationship with the wind. This was the design for the new scheme. It was to be a Gothic makeover. And one of the additions was a shaded veranda, which would create cooler air as it enters the space, and then an exhaust in the ceiling where hot air would go out. Right? They're reducing wind resistance, creating space for air to move. like we see the jockey moving in tandem with the physics of air. It's the second to last image we'll see of Sunhil's in this presentation. When I saw this, I immediately counted 8 horses. I love it. And so I asked, are horses social creatures? Yes, horses are highly social, herd-oriented creatures that require the companionship of other horses to thrive. Right? I think we are exactly like that. We actually require the companionship of other people to thrive. And when we don't have that, we all suffer. This is the Bombay Park, one of the earliest public park proposal for the city by Arthur Crawford. Sunhil talked a bit about it. Unbuilt, of course. That's the old race course. Then a 200-acre park in the center of the city, styled on New York City's Central Park. One of the unique things about this scheme, all the residences that lived here were to be rehoused on today's race course. Very radical idea. But this is my favorite public space, where people come together, encouraging other people to thrive through that social companionship. This is Charles Correa's Back Bay waterfront proposal, of course, unbuilt. Of course, there's architecture in this, but what I love in this drawing are the people, right? When was the last time we saw an architectural rendering that had this quality and depth and richness of people? There's a young couple with a toddler, maybe an elderly couple staring at the seascape. There's a loner. I love to walk alone, so this is me. There's a young group of kids. But my favorite person in this image is this one, the very center. Just look at that, right? This is what good public spaces, good architecture does. It creates opportunities for people to be carefree, to be completely carefree. There's a tree behind, the sky above, and the ocean beyond. And tying all of these individuals and spaces together is spirit, right? It's the fifth element, right? It's this invisible force that connects us and ties us in ways that we cannot explain. So as I've been thinking about why do I love Sunhil's work, I think his work, for me, he captures this living relationship with the 5 elements, and that moves me. It's very discreet, it's very quiet, but it's there if we listen. And that's why when I see his work, it touches the heart. And I think that's also why I'm starting to get a better understanding. This is why Bombay Imagine captivated me for the nearly decade while I was working on it. It captures this pursuit of a life with the 5 elements, right? A failed pursuit, but still this deep human pursuit across centuries of a life embedded with the 5 elements. And it's something that ties us all together. So as we were wrapping up the first edition of Bombay Imagined in 2021, pandemic was raging. This is Kai. He was about 5 at the time. We had gone to Bangalore as a family to spend time with Tina's parents, who you see here. This is Tina. And one night we sat around a fire. The fire was powerful. It did something. But what moved me the most that evening was our feet were on the ground. They were touching the earth. And something happened in that moment. I looked at Tina. It's a true story. I looked at her. I said, this can be our lives every single day. Okay, Tina's parents owned the land, and I had this phrase I said, and she looked at me and she said, absolutely, let's do it. And we decided that night we're going to build a home, we're going to build an architecture studio, and we're going to build a public library on this piece of land that had just moved us minutes before. And the first thing we started with was water, because water is the source of life. It's from which we are born. We opened the earth. We worked with traditional well diggers. As they opened the earth, they just gave forth this incredible underworld that we had never seen, and water just was plentiful. And this is in Bangalore. It's supposed to be a dark zone city. And this is the well. All of our water comes from this space. And the well changed our lives. It changed our aesthetic lives as well. We watched as the well diggers made this structure completely in dry stone masonry, connecting us with this life-giving element every day. And then we said maybe we can also create a ground floor space that learns from this well creation. So this is our ground floor. It's 325 granite solid blocks interspersed with glass blocks. These are the glass blocks from inside. This is my studio. This is also the Bombay reading room. It's more than 400 books of the city, and all publicly accessible. And these are the glass blocks. They're works of art, and they're made by fire, right? So when you're in the presence of fire, be very alert because it's transformative. It does things that we cannot anticipate. This is that space. It's a workspace, but it's also a guest room. And sometimes when I lie down here and look up, I see things that just, I feel guilty sometimes because there's such incredible experiences of light and material. This is the Bombay space. And as you go up through this space, there are other cities. This is Delhi, Bangalore. There's a Patrick Geddes reading room. And anyone can come, check out books in the space, sit and read in the garden. And the garden is treated completely with sewage water, black and gray, from our house, inspired by Hector Tulloch's scheme, who Sunhil quoted, inspired by Hector Tulloch's scheme to treat all of Bombay's wastewater and use it for irrigation. So we learned from him and implemented it in this space. We have no municipal sewage connection in this property. As you go up through the space, it begins to become more domestic. On the right is the living room and the kitchen. And then this is Kai's room. His room's the coolest space in the house, in my opinion. And as you go up further, you realize there are no walls separating rooms, right? They're just level differences. And that's because air, right? Hot air rises. So we allow the hot air to rise through the space. And then in the ceiling, there's a skylight, but also a chimney where hot air goes out, just like James Troopshaw's plan for St. Thomas Cathedral with that hot air chimney in the ceiling, right? Because we're cultivating a new relationship with air. We're working with it like the jockey, not resisting it. When we moved to Bangalore, we knew nobody. We still don't know many people, but for some reason, visitors started coming and we started hosting what we call walkthroughs, where we would experience the space for 3 hours together, and they've become a thing, and it's really, really special. And I asked Tina, we were very confused. We've done this 28 times so far, and we're still doing it. And I asked her why. Like, when people come, why do they stay and then leave and tell friends, and those friends come? And I have a theory that when you experience this space, you feel the hope that's embedded in Bombay's unbuilt past, because much of the past is this pursuit of a life with the 5 elements. It's utopian, it's idealistic. And this space, in a very micro way, lives that aspiration, and it's very special. So this is creating spirit. Yeah, it's creating spirit, right? We're cultivating these invisible connections between people. And it's really special. And then last thing, I'll just close here. This is the east facade. The sun rises in the morning from this space, and it does magical things. I think of C.F. Andrews almost every morning as I see this is when light enters the space in the morning, and every day it's different. And it's powerful. And you see light moving, reflecting. Bonnie doesn't like it, but everyone else does, hitting the toilet seat. And every day, because the light's moving, it's special. And this is my favorite image of the space, because I feel, when I see this image, I feel the intensity of our star, right? Of the sun, just light, just colliding with the earth in this moment. And it feels almost meteoric. It's powerful. And this is that experience of fire, right? It moves us. It's spiritual, right? As Scroll knows. And some mornings when the sun's rising, I look straight at it. It's a 3-inch opening, and this is what happens. And it reminds me of Le Corbusier's Ronchamp in France. Very powerful space, how he captures sunlight. And when I think of Corbusier, I think of Marine Drive, because he wanted to design the Air India Tower at the end of Marine Drive. And he approached J.R.D. Tata, and Tata said no. And Charles Correa said this about that interaction in 1986. He said this: "Can you imagine what would have happened if Corbusier had built this building at the end of Marine Drive? It would have been an architectural gesture that would have changed our lives. 10 or 20 other people driving down Marine Drive would have been inspired to create a building like that. It would have changed our city." That's such a statement, because we have forgotten, by and large, that buildings can change our cities. They can change our lives. And we're very fortunate to be living this reality. It's a small space, but it has changed our lives. And there's some individuals who come and visit and say in some way, in a small way deep within, it also changes a part of them. This is from the street. This is our space in Bangalore. In the front, you see this mango tree. It's about 15 years old. Tina's parents planted it long before we got married, of course, way before Kai was born. And now their grandson looks at the canopy of that tree. And I love this image because when I see it, I see a life that's carefree, right? Embedded in the elements. There's fire, the tree, there's wood. And when I see him, I think of this nameless person who never lived, but yet I feel this person speaks so strongly of what life can look like when it's so grounded. And then last image, Sunhil's from Race Day. This is a jockey. Jockeys are living with the elements in their lives, and it shows in his stance. His shoes are off. He is carefree, right? This is Kaviraj. Am I right? Kaviraj? Yeah. King of poets. And so Sunhil ended his video with a question. And its question is, anything really sacred anymore? Now, I'm not going to presume to answer it, but I'd like to speculate. So what if we listen to Kaviraj, and this nameless kin in the center? What are they saying through their lives, right? Lived or unlived, what are they saying? And I think if we listen closely, right, I think they're saying everything elemental is sacred, and it always will be. Thank you.
Gosh. I don't know. The two of you have created this sort of magic, and it almost feels like one doesn't want to break it by talking, but let us talk. I just wanted to say quickly, Robert, because we're talking so much about connections and you both responding to each other's work, and that last image of the woman, the one who may not exist. And what she reminds me of is this book called Why Loiter, written by, some extremely kind of sociologists and journalists in Bombay. They're talking about the woman's right to loiter. This sort of seems to be in line with that. So I wanted to start by talking about practice because, and that's what has been actually the sort of substance of what both of you all showed today, And I think the way, first of all, the two of you responded to each other's work shows a very rare sensitivity. And as I said, you're talking about creating, I find magic. You're talking about the elements, simplicity. You're talking about just going and recording, and that giving you that much value. And we're talking about a city that is all built on aspiration and commerce. So this seems to be like a space you created by yourselves, but also then when you come into contact with, with other practitioners. So I wanted to ask, start with you, Sunhil, what gives you the confidence to just do this?
Honestly, it's, if I'm to be slightly facetious, it's sort of a certain amount of stupidity. It's like, why would you just keep, retreading your footsteps again and again and again, year after year, month after month, and, see the same place. It looks the same as it did last year. It looks the same as it did, next year. So, they're storing fertilizer instead of cement this year, or so, you remark on these tiny little things that change, but it's entirely meditative, right? And you don't really know. So it's Gita-esque as well. You have absolutely no intent whatsoever. You have no interest in the result. You're
not
doing
the fruits of
not at all.
Yeah.
You're doing it purely because it gives you a really monumental amount of peace, which is why you should never make the books later, because that's what takes it apart. But no, really, it's just absolute meditation. And I think the purposelessness, it used to, when we first spoke, Robert, when we were in conversation 3 years ago, I was terrified of how silly I was going to sound by just saying, I'm aimless, I don't know what I'm doing. And until I read Rilke, and it really changed my life, this idea of patience. So you don't really know why you're doing something, and I think for me that is the greatest gift. Yeah.
And Corbusier said some of the best creations in the world have been born out of this meandering, aimlessness. So nice, good company.
Did you also, is your journey similar in the sense that I know that you stumbled on something and that led you, but you were an architect, or you are an architect, and this was...
So I had given up on Bombay Imagined. I actually offered to give the whole archive to a publisher at one point, because I thought, like, somebody should do it, because I can't do it right now, or ever. And fortunately, Tina, my wife, she's always right. Like, she's so much smarter than me. She said, stop the drama, leave it in your cupboard. At the right time, it will happen. And she was exactly right. And this was the first time in life I realized the intensity of seasons of life. And because, like, when I was in school, I was one of those kids who did good and I followed everyone's instructions. And then as an adult, like, no one's giving you instructions in your creative projects, right? It's completely up to you. And what do you do when you get discouraged, when you lose hope? And sometimes the best thing is you just wait. And for me, that was powerful. So now, and I realized though now, like, I say wait, it was actually incubation. All the research, all the thoughts that were in my mind, they were incubating. And they needed that downtime so that when the fire came back, they had been like churning. So yeah, that's the journey.
That's interesting. And can we talk about, because you've done this conversation before, and it's now 3 to 4 years later. So has your practice changed in any way? Have you tried out something new that you want to share with us?
I think if I were to try to answer that quite specifically, it's that as much as I enjoy this aimlessness and time, not putting any time limits on things, and exactly as you say, incubation, there comes a time where you actually want to start sculpting your work, where you want to start shaping it into something. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because since we met, a huge amount has changed in my life. Firstly, when I began, photography was, I hate the word, but it was a hobby. Right? It was something I did as a reaction to the intensity and craziness of filmmaking and huge crews and studios and agencies and people like that. So it was a resistance move. Now I discover that some people like to hire me for some odd reason, and that terrifies me. But I'm very lucky that whoever has hired me has given me carte blanche to shoot the way I want to and make the pictures just the way I want to, which is a gift like I can't even begin to explain how beautiful that is. But yes, I'd say what's changed is a bit of courage. I've got the courage to start building narratives out of this archive, and it's a double-edged sword, because the archive is monumental, and I trudge through it a bit like I trudge through streets. I don't label things properly when I photograph. So, I'm that folder from 2011, or that folder from 2000, and oh God, where, there were these Post-it notes where I've written, there's a man with his foot somewhere, and, in 2013 in folder, and then I'm hunting for that picture. And while I'm hunting for that picture, I stumble upon another one. And it's a very similar process that happens when you're actually sculpting the work as to when you're shooting. But I prefer being on the street, to be honest. But yes, so a little more confidence.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How long had you said courage? How long had you been practicing, not photography, but film before Opium?
25 years.
So I think that's really important,
Yeah.
because you had been creating this skill set.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's when we first met. Is like, who is this guy? Like, where has he come from? Like, it wasn't like you'd been sharing work for, the last 15 years. Like, you came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to the power of practice and honing a skill for decades, and not being like, I'm going to go out and do it immediately. And I resonate with that, because I practiced for 15 years. before I made my first project, our home, and before Bombay Imagine came out. And sometimes it takes a huge amount of time before you feel you have the courage to create something that is worthy of living, you know.
Which is why that Rilke is so important when he writes letters to a young poet, when he writes to, what's his name?
I can't recall the person.
The teachings are just so profound. It's just about patience. And we have Instagram today to give us our recognition, to give us our likes, to give us our moment in the sun. But gravitas takes time. Yeah.
I think, in fact, you were a filmmaker, and I think when you look at your photographs, there's so much drama. I mean, it's, you can enter a whole world. And I think similar with your work, that you enter a rabbit hole. And I think to me, wonder marks both your, the sense of being struck by something. You're not jaded. You're not doing it for, an instrumental way. You're just allowing yourself to feel that whoosh of. So is that, you feel that
and
defines?
When I was putting together this talk, I had remembered that Scroll article from 2019 when everyone was sharing the blue sky images. And I remembered that and feeling like remembering the wonder everyone was feeling. And then it so happened, like the day I was working on that part of the talk, the sky went blue last week. Yeah. And like, do you all remember? Am I making this up?
No,
yeah, everyone remembers.
But you know that it's a particular, I was telling, as we walk in our garden, and there's 10 days or a week in February where it happens every year.
Oh,
and it's because one photograph's showing But, never had I seen it so widely publicized.
Yeah, but I think it speaks to like, Bombay is, I'm presuming it's the richest city in India. Mm-hmm. Anything can be bought, and yet the sky is capturing our imagination. Like, that speaks to the human wonder.
That's lovely.
And I love it. Like, I think it teaches us a lot if we listen to this message.
Wealth, true wealth, right? Yeah. So let's try and put your work and your practice now in the context of the city. And if you can talk a bit about, because the kind of work both of you do builds on access and trust. So let's talk a bit about porosity and reception. Robert, you showed us a little bit of the coastal forest. And, you've in your book, Bombay Imagined, you have planners and dreamers like Crawford and William Walker and Charles Correa. And from writing about them, you've actually become one of them, right? So how has this experience of designing the coastal forest, if you can tell us a little more about how it came about, and what does it make you think about, feasibility versus fantasy, this sort of contradiction or not contradiction?
So the Mumbai coastal forest, you all have heard about it. I hope some of you, it's the land, it's a proposal, citizen-led proposal for the land between the coastal road and I'll call it the ancient city footprint, right? And I think it was early last year, a community group got in touch and said, hey, like, you're really good at imagination, right? Like you think and you have visual imagination. Can we collaborate and develop a scheme, an idea that we have for this land? Because it's a most bizarre piece of land, because land is so valuable, and yet it's been sitting barren for months, years now, actually. So they said, help us make something. So we made a scheme, and I wouldn't even call it design. It was an imagination. My friend Aaron Patel, he said, let's create a new vocabulary for the city, one in which our relationship with the world is in no way, shape, or form engineered. And I love the simplicity of that we don't need monkey bars, we don't need some artificial metallic canopy. We just need to be able to put our feet on the earth, to see the sky, to hear water if possible, and to live with the elements. And so we made this scheme, and it's lived its own life and meandered, and now, of course, a corporate entity is developing it. And I'm personally very hopeful for what they're developing. I think there was a message of a new way of living that people in the city, by and large, want. And it's a simple way of living. And I think they're developing a scheme that's leaning that direction. So I'm hopeful. Touch wood, it progresses and finds its way.
So fantasy can be realized.
Totally. Oh yeah, I didn't answer the question. Fantasy must be realized, I would say. Timeline we can't keep on it, but I think we all lean towards a life of fantasy. That's something I believe deeply.
One of the elements of this plan for the coastal forest, I think, is you taking the old coastal edge, and you made it a pathway, and that's lovely because then you're kind of bringing history into it.
Yeah.
Memory.
Yeah. So I mean, I just
Yes,
one minute
no,
on this. So we are a city of reclamations, and yet anywhere in the city today we have no idea what came before us. No idea. And this is the one chance to say we start something new. Like, yes, we have destroyed a certain ecology. If we can't bring it back, let's at least remember it. So the pathways were to be that ancient coastline. So as you're walking with kids, with friends, you have this realization that you're not, the first one here. Others have come before you. So, yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. I know that you also have little lamps with the marine animals on it. So we're kind of connecting with the water and the flora and the fauna. Sunil, you said in one of your, I think it's in your book, while one wall disappears, allowing me closer, another is built, keeping me away. Security tightens as the years pass. My propensity for trespassing lands me in trouble a little more often than it used to. So how can we talk about access? How does the city respond to you? Does it allow you in more now? Less?
I think broadly less, But having said that, I'm not the smallest guy in the world, but a lot of people have remarked on how invisible I become, and I think that's something to do with energy. So there's one part of my practice is very much lurking around on street corners and hanging around and wandering aimlessly through streets, and there are a lot of people around in that practice, and I tend to allow my presence to be felt. People know I'm there. I wait. I'm quite careful in terms of when I press the shutter, how I relate to people around me. If I sense any sense of discomfort in anyone around, I'll move on. Because I do think it's a symbiotic relationship with your subject over there. But that's one side of my practice which I love and I miss because I'm shooting a lot more urban landscape at the moment on the eastern seaboard, and I love it. But our little walk was so much fun because we went, to an old Hindustan lever factory, which is in Haji Bandar, which has been, in the same state since 1970, and it's got the most beautiful iron gate, the most spectacular trees, And on my last visit there, I went in and there's this instantaneous security guy who says, stop kind of thing. And then you just start laughing and asking questions and saying something. And then on my last visit, I went all the way in and he took me onto the roof, and then started talking to me about the Russell Vipers that come at night and, and which I've almost interacted with on a couple of times. But so you get these kind of, you do make, you have to act fairly dumb sometimes and then, ask questions. And people, I've been very lucky, that I do get access. Sometimes there are calamities, but more often than not, it's positive. And that is why repetition is also important,
I was lucky to go with Sunil. Very generously took me for a walk. And so I've kind of experienced the madness, so to speak. But of course, the gatekeeping in snakes and stuff. So yeah, all kinds.
I just, I'm learning. This is the great thing about panels, by the way. You learn things about the panelists. I'm slowly learning why I like you so much. Because my wife's also an event photographer, and people comment she's invisible, she's quiet when she goes through, and I love that about her character. And see, that's why I'm married to her, but I like you. I like you because you share that quiet, like that when you're doing your art, like doing it quietly. You're not shouting, you're not causing a ruckus to create something. Like it's admirable.
And it's so much better than shouting at 500 extras on a set to move to the left and the AD screaming and someone else shouting and everyone making a big noise to make something reasonably pointless.
It's amazing how conducive quiet can be to art.
Yeah.
That's something I've been learning recently.
That is sacred.
Yeah, amazing.
You talked about, I think you took Chekhov's advice in writing to heart, which stressed objectivity and telling the truth and compassion. And maybe that also kind of comes into this.
Yeah, I think Chekhov is novelist. I think he was a novelist.
He wrote plays as well.
So he was definitely an inspiration, but I think what I learned from Chekhov, and I learned of Chekhov through Amitabha Kumar, so I highly recommend. He writes about writing a lot. We bring the whole of our being and the quality of our character to our art. It's not like we check into an office or we sit at a desk and we become one person. We do our art and then we check out and we're somewhere else. So if we're claiming to write with honesty, with objectivity, for me, there's something about it that pushes life, like saying this is also a great way to live, like at all times. And I really enjoy this. I've in the last, I would say, 10 years, deeply enjoyed learning from other people who are like highly, they've achieved a lot or whatever you want to say. Because it's just there's something about it, learning from their experiences that can deeply move us, and I'm having trouble articulating it. But
Could we talk a little bit about the changing city? I know you are both in that sense, not judging. You respond, emotionally or with imagination, but you did say that you found yourself when you're talking about the development, the subject that's dear to you, you've been photographing, that you did feel some sort of views. And I don't want you necessarily to kind of talk more about that, but I just wanted to say that even in your earlier photographs, there is a way that you capture a moment. There is a photograph of a train compartment and women in the opium, where they kind of, it's a common trope, right? Women in a compartment and sharing, cutting vegetables on their way home and things. But you have it against a very bleak background. And it says something. It's not...
Is it the blur, the black?
Yes, it's
blur.
the black blur, yeah.
It's actually caught through a moving train's window and they're on a platform.
So there is something, it evokes a mood that is a political statement. Not a heavy-handed one, but there is a way of looking at something. So are you in any way responding to the changing city through your work, even when you're not trying to?
It's a really, really difficult question to answer because there's a literality to the change, that's very obvious to your eyes. And towards the end of Race Day, what I showed, I put a series of images together that sort of showed this transforming skyline. I try not to make before and after narratives, and I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in how things feel. And I think you can... Like, for example, in Eastwood, I'm photographing places 10 years apart and they're the same. That doesn't, there's still a different emotional feeling in the two different photographs taken at the same time. That itself is a statement as well. So, it's the changing city. So one of the, this is the core. The core of it is to avoid... To feel your way through things and not see your way through things. That is at the core of it, right? But on a more sort of literal level, Robert, when you were talking about the coastal forests, the one thing I observed about the city, and was that the changes that are happening on the mainland seem to be higgledy-piggledy and all over the place and sort of what something on top of the other. And now it's really come to that point where everything's falling on top of on top of people, and things are falling apart in that sense. But when it's outside, when it's on the coastal road, when it's new, there's hope, is exactly what Robert was saying. But when we're sort of inside, when I see that parking lots coming through the racecourse again, I had to put that image in the book, because this is another thing. When you now I'm ramble is beginning, but it's that when you create documents, when you make books, when you leave something, you see they're much more powerful than movies. They're more powerful. A single image can have so much more power over 20, 30, 40 years than they serve different purposes. But the idea of judiciously sort of selecting what is going to make the biggest statement, but not indulging in the idea of this very obvious sort of change.
Right.
You know, that's why things take time.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, I don't know if that answers.
Yes, because you're saying you go beyond the literal to kind of, and, you know, your delightful space, the library come home, which I have, again, been privileged to visit. Is it a kind of resistance then?
Totally. So another true story. One day, so we say public library, and people ask me, is it like really can anyone just walk in? Okay, no joke. One day I'm at home, I come downstairs. We've never met in person, and Amrita's downstairs. And I'm like, hello. And it was so nice. Like, it was fabulous. It was the first time we were meeting, and she was like testing the system. Like, nah, I'm kidding. But it was great. And it brought us together in this really unique way. And it's absolutely a resistance. For me personally, was that the word resistance?
Yes.
It was a resistance to formal library systems that required a character reference from someone else before you could get access to that space. Because to me, that says you are not trustworthy until we hear from someone else. And that starts from a negative place. And I abhor that. I abhor it. Because I feel when you inherently trust people, yes, you might get burned once out of 100, but those 99 times can be really empowering, I find, for people. And I think that's how we create new cultures. And I think we have to create a new culture. And that's why I think also Correa said, you know, Corbusier's Air India Tower could have changed our city, because physical spaces can change our cities. They can change our cultures. They can change how we live and relate with one another. And we have to remember that. So I feel very, very satisfied when people experience that resistance and it moves them, even if they're not able to use that word, because otherwise, what's the point of any of it? Yeah.
Right. So the subject, I think, of our talk, our event today is Urban Legacies. That's the title. We're talking about Bombay in Mumbai. What stays with all this sort of very fervid change? What stays? And I'm sure in the audience, each one will have some kind of, attachment to some part of Bombay that they would like to, kind of see continuing. But may I ask you, as sort of closing remarks, to what do you see? You talked about a continuum, when you were photographing the race course. What do you see sort of persisting?
The idea of a Bombay. Oh gosh, you completely threw me off in our conversation.
Oh dear.
Yes, this sense of staticness. I think this idea, which again is resistance. It's sort of my dear friend Aisha and the audience have flat in St James's Court on Marine Drive. I used to, the absolute joy of going into that house is that it probably hasn't changed since 1960 or something. You know, it's exactly 40s. It hasn't changed a bit, and there is something so comforting about that. You know, that's what I mean by continuum. That while everything needs to be, so there's also this very this difference between redevelopment and restoration, I think. And right now, everything's redevelopment. Right. And I've been lucky to be a part of a few restorative projects. But I think it's that sense of staticness for me is very comforting.
Put me in a tight spot with that. I'm kidding. What's the question? Can
Oh, well, so where does Bombay stay on in Mumbai?
Yeah.
What is the legacy that is being
yeah.
kind of left behind for us?
What fascinates me is, so I think with hands down, Bombay, Mumbai is the epicenter of ideas in India. It always has been. No other city could compare to the number of, I'll say, unbuilt ideas. Every week I find schemes. Every week,
Wow.
like that are not in the book. There's nothing like it, and there's something about this city. No matter how seemingly, because at every moment in time, people think it's bad. They think it's. They say the same thing across decades, centuries. It can't get worse. Like it's doomed. And out of that grief, that misery, you see fantasies. You see these ideas, and it keeps happening. Last night I was having dinner with a friend in Bandra who was lamenting that Turner Road is now like going to become a parking lot of parking spaces. And then he had this idea: what if these parking spaces transformed into either residences or public-facing programs, and everyone relied on like robot cars, self-driven cars. And I thought, what a crazy idea, but also so beautiful. Like he's thinking ideas for solutions, and it keeps happening. So I feel very privileged to be able to immerse myself in this this history, but also this present of constantly having our minds alert to improving the world around us. Because even if we don't succeed in Bombay, we're living it in Bangalore. Other people can take those ideas and live with them, learn from them, and that's a gift, I think, to the world at large that we're able to give.
That's a lovely point at which to end, I think. Can we open it up to the audience? Yes.
That was like a topic that is closest to all of us, especially born in Bombay. And over the last 60 decades, every single day I see a new frame. I see, like, say, if you go to the rooftop at Oberoi, there's a certain frame of the sun's, the sky and the landscape. That seems to not change. If you walk up the marathon on Marine Drive, that's another landscape. Yes, thanks to the AQI, the sun doesn't seem the same, though it's supposed to be something that is permanent. If you go to Lollapalooza, all three editions, Bombay looks totally different from the Ferris wheel.
Right.
You couldn't even imagine that the Amateur Riders Club have this little cove, which you see that. And even that over the 90s, which I remember seeing it, there is so much that is constant and yet changing. Like while we talked about the coastline, underground we have this whole huge aqua line. So it's absolutely like, I mean, if you see there's a Papad Gali in Girgaon which is unchanged. And yet there is, I mean, these narratives are like frame by frame, it's a discovery almost over the last 60 years on a daily basis.
Right.
So this wasn't a question, but this was just a shout out to the city I love.
Okay, Bombay and Mumbai perhaps.
Thank you so much for organizing this for us. We need these spaces in Mumbai. My question to you, Robert sir, is that the Mahalakshmi Racecourse plan has come out. There are some plans and buildings that we look at, like the Falling Waters, and we're like, wow, this is beautiful. And then there are some plans that you look at and said, we don't want this. How important is public consultation, especially when there are programs, there are projects that are where the largest stakeholders are the people of Mumbai. When you look at Racecourse, RWITC members have been consulted, but people haven't. And since the past so many years, there are people who are non-members using the space. The second thing is, with respect to the coastal road, you have the Worli link that ends, and there is no connection between the Worli link and the Hajeli link that goes till the end of the tunnel. So when projects happen, is there little or no consultation done to at least understand if there can be a link? My question to you is these two, and with respect to Sir Sipisa, I wanted to understand when you documented things at the Mahalakshmi Racecourse, did you see two different lives? You know, people that are at the racecourse riding, then there are people at RWITC, there are people at ARC, then there is another life of people walking with their dogs, playing yoga, cycling, running, doing all of those things. If I heard that you said that you don't really look at the picture and think about it and click, but then you weave the story later on. How do you do that how do you document two lives when you're actually looking at the space that truly belongs to the people of Mumbai? There's two questions. Thank you.
I sense the time's a little short. I don't have a direct, super clear answer for the first question, to be very honest. Public consultation is essential. However, I'm a designer. I design keeping in mind other people's needs, but I don't design what they tell me. Okay? So it's really, really critical. The source of an idea, from what is that born of? It's really important. I'm not commenting on any specific plans right now. I just, with the racecourse, I would say it's important to step back and ask, what is the problem we're trying to solve? I think before a proposal is put for anything in life, I think it's good to ask oneself, whether it's an individual or a city, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And the racecourse is fascinating, that Mahalakshmi is fascinating because historically you see at least 3 plans for lakes in that land, right? The problem they were trying to solve is you have the lowest part of the island that floods every year. So what do you do with it? You make it a lake and you make it a beautiful space that people can enjoy. So when I see a plan today or yesterday or 3 months from now, first thing I will ask is, what is the problem they're solving? And after the ideas in the world, then of course public consultation is essential. But public consultation does not design. That's not the role of that engagement, in my opinion. It's to critique and give feedback. Yeah, and the coastal road, but I can't answer that, but hopefully there will be some pedestrian access. From what I'm understanding, enough people are pushing for it that you can walk from Worli to Nepean Road. I think that will happen. I'm hopeful, and I love the unbuilt, but I'm hopeful this will happen, one way or the other. But that space was just never planned historically. It was the road was planned, the rest was residual. And I think we're living that reality now. And this, we're talking 1960s, the road was first planned. The in-between space never had a plan. It was left over. So now it's to be fixed.
And I'll keep it short. I think curiosity drives me on all levels. So when I have access to places like the community, the racing community, and I get to cross those barriers, I have a slightly different observational approach, but the public space is as compelling, if not actually more compelling, than the private spaces. And my archive on the public space is enormous. But trying to weave that one of the most challenging things that we found when we were trying to build a particular narrative out of this was how to construct this narrative. So they're both as important as each other, and they, in a sense, they live off each other in a sense, because this exists, this can exist. So when I had dinner with Subhag, the trainer, he lives in the stables, and to actually be on that open land is absolutely magnificent, and it's part of the public space. So it all joins up together for me, and it's just one part of my practice is driven entirely by curiosity. So that's what keeps it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert and Sunil. I mean, this is once again, we went on a journey searching for Bombay and Mumbai. When we do about 200 these programs a year and we put panels together, we always think about chemistry check. This one, I mean, we've hit it out of the ballpark, for lack of better words. But, I think the first collaboration was in 22. It was 22, not 23. And, 2 different books, now 26, again, 2 separate books. I think in, 2030, I think you'll just collaborate. And we have a new series actually coming out called Double Take, and which is looking at interdisciplinary collaborations within people in different practices. So we'll feature you on that. So needless to say, we're looking for the third book. But thank you, Amrita, for so skillfully keeping these two gentlemen in check and moderating the conversation. I know that was a tough one from the Zoom call we had, but thank you to the NGMA, Nidhi ji and Shruti for hosting us, and to this wonderful audience for being in such large numbers. We have a wonderful lineup of programs coming up next Wednesday. In fact, in this very room, we have the 4th edition of Motifs, Materials and Markers, where we're going to be looking at the Indo-Saracenic architecture of Bombay. We've done Bauhaus, we've done mid-century modern, we've done Gothic. And tomorrow we have a screenwriting workshop at SR House. If anyone's interested, it's almost a full-day workshop. And on Sunday we have 2 storytelling programs at the Opera House with Laksh Maheshwari. So many things happening. Just stalk us on Instagram like normal people do, or check out our website. But thank you once again for being here, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.